The original Dragon's Dogma is a cult classic to some, an ARPG that was obscure, unusual, and largely overshadowed by the release of the Elder Scrolls Skyrim just months prior. It was well received, but as its creator, Hideaki Itsuno, put it, they were only able to complete about 60 to 70% of their vision at the time. So why on earth did they release Dragon's Dogma 2 in a similar state? Even more confusing is that Itsuno claims that he achieved his vision in this iteration, but honestly, I struggle to see what's new other than our furry friends here. In this video, we will explore the game design decisions that have left players scratching their heads and dive into why critics gave this game glowing reviews, which have been starkly contrasted by the consumer experience. I'll cover story and open world experience, combat and enemy variety, and close out with our critic versus consumer mindset. Chapter markers if you want to skip forward, and let me thank you for checking out this video. Throw me a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more, and catch me in the comments to talk about it further. So, story and obscure storytelling. Now this is subjective. Everyone will have differing views on how a story should be told. To set the scene here, I enjoy finding out story beats myself. I love how Elden Ring and the Souls series tell their stories. I don't get overly invested in them, but I appreciate it despite its immense obscurity. Coming into Dragon's Dogma 2, we were told the game wouldn't hold your hand. Pawns would play a large role in supporting the player, and the game leans heavily into allowing and encouraging you to summon pawns that have completed your current quest and can guide you. But that's not really necessary, until it is. I found Dragon's Dogma 2 largely underwhelming, with messy writing and unusual quest design, but what I dislike about Dragon's Dogma 2 is how inconsistent it is in its story and mission setup. I won't dive deep into story spoilers, but let's talk mission design. Early on, you're guided quickly to the main city of Amund, and then thrown into a long line of stealth missions. The game does nothing to set up that there is a stealth mechanic, and after playing through 3 or 4, and I'll put it in quotes, stealth missions, I'm left wondering if the game has a stealth mechanic at all. It's rather confusing, but you're essentially asked to go sneak around the castle for information, but the guards don't care, or at least they don't care until they do. You can get right up on them, and they don't bat an eye, and you basically repeat the same mission multiple times. You just go into different rooms in the castle. For a game based on exploring a vast and diverse open world, I was bored silly sneaking into a castle over and over so early into the game. But it's the inconsistencies that ended up breaking a lot of the immersion, and where I started to see cracks. In one quest, I'm told to go speak to the magistrate in jail. I was probably told to sneak in, but as I arrive, the entrance guard greets me. Doesn't say anything more than, "Hey, the captain said you were coming." So I'm thinking, good, my arrival is known. Then I get down into the jail, and I'm chased down and locked up. Imagine walking up to a jail, and a guard at the front says, "Hey buddy, good to see you. We've got your booking right here. The literal captain of the entire city told us you'd be coming." Then you go inside, and the guards inside know nothing about it, and take you out. Even worse, I break out of the prison, and there's no interest in me at all. Surely a prison break in a city attracts attention. And I get my items once I leave the threshold? I'm just not sure where this was meant to go. What was the detriment to me? In another quest, I'm tasked with finding evidence of a person poisoning others. The quest tells me to find evidence and report it to the Sentinels. I find the evidence and have no real clue where to go. So I go to speak to the quest giver, but can't. I go to speak to the suspect, but she tells me to leave. I'm not sure where to find the Sentinels, but before I go looking, I'm told by a viewer while streaming that I'm meant to tackle the suspect if I have all the evidence. And at that point, I was just disappointed as I did it. The game cut to black and the quest was done. No monologue at the end, no arrest scene, just, yep, you tackled that bitch, well done. The quest design in this game, I believe, was half complete. And the best example of that must be the Mystic Spearhand vocation. So let's break that down and see how it fails. To unlock this, you travel to Melve, and a dragon is there attacking the town. While fighting the dragon, you may notice this guy has a unique fighting style. Okay, I like it. We're trying to give context clues. This is good storytelling. I'm seeing something new if I'm paying attention, which is slightly hard given how many NPCs are present, but he does stand out. But as the fight ends, he starts taking off. Okay, that's fine. Let's go chat. After all, we did notice he is different and he doesn't know who I am as a player. He tells me that his fighting style is completely unique. No one else does this. And he fights like this specifically to take down dragons. Then, the vocation is unlocked. And we never interact with him again. And we learn everything we need by talking to him in this generic town? So you want me to believe your world isn't plastic and is alive? I find an NPC that has a unique fighting style. No one else does this, I'm told. I've never seen anyone else do this, so sure, I believe it. I'm really keen to learn about this style. I'm psyched for it. He introduces it, then turns around and walks off. And I know it all, or at least I will after leveling up. It's whiplash, and it happens often in the way the stories are told in this game. You're running down a track following story beats, then it jolts to the left and into a rock, then back straight for no reason. This guy has 2 lines of dialogue about being some unique master, and that's it. Thanks for imparting your knowledge on me, I guess? I'm almost certain that this was going to be a quest line, and they cut it. I bet you were supposed to meet him here, the dragon was going to fly off, and you were going to help him track it down. But here I am coming up with better quest lines while writing this review than someone at Capcom was paid to. And because it was cut, it feels half-baked. I guess because it is, that's almost the definition of it. And that boils over to the open world, unfortunately. It's rather limited and smaller than I'd anticipated. There was a big focus on fast travel not being readily available, and I largely feel that continued to be the case, because if you could fast travel freely in this game, it would be much, much shorter than it is. Many points of interest are small dungeons, small ruins, and have a chest every room or so. Have a pile of junk on the floor you can search for items. I'm surprised in 2024 we're still searching miscellaneous things to get items rather than having them sitting naturally around the world, like in most open world games these days. I don't feel accomplished as a player when I walk into a cave, clear it out, and see a chest. Or when I'm walking through a world and there's just a chest on a cliff. Who is keeping their valuables here? But largely what harms this game more than anything is its enemy variety and density. To quickly add some praise, I really enjoy the combat. It's diverse, a little too similar to the original, but as someone who didn't play it extensively, I'm less concerned with that. But being able to climb all over large creatures is novel and great. There is some decent variety and build switching that could have kept this fresh the entire way through. Unfortunately, there is only so much variety, and you can only stay fresh for so long when you're fighting the same enemies repeatedly. And this is where Dragon's Dogma 2 stumbled the most. This has been a common complaint among consumers, is that you're often fighting the same enemies over and over and well, over. And when a game does this, it needs to provide one thing, which is value. There needs to be a purpose to killing them. But honestly, for a world that is absolutely filled to the brim with cyclopses and ogres on main roads, there is little urgency to deal with them from the NPCs. Some comment on it, but I'm surprised you're not further incentivized to kill these enemies. The first time I fought a Cyclops, it was amazing! Cinematic as hell. I was climbing on it even though I was an archer, taking shots, and even finished it with a kick to the eye. I was on cloud 9, I was thrilled to get out there and do more. And then I killed 5 more Cyclopses, maybe a couple of ogres, and found a griffin that flew away. By the time I'd killed 10 Cyclopses, I'd killed a handful more ogres, killed a griffin and minotaur or 2. How do you think I felt the next time a Cyclops was in my path? I was over it. For a game that forces me to walk from point A to point B, that walk needs to be inviting. It needs to be interesting, and it needs to be purposeful. Starting out, it was, and I was loving it. But I can only kill so many Cyclops, with goblin, wolf, and lizard steps between, before I start to question why bother when I could try run around, and when players start making that decision, you've lost it. Let me compare this to The Witcher 3 and Elden Ring to contrast it. In Elden Ring, you leave the starting zone and you see the tree sentinel. If you kill it, you won't see another until the mid-game. In The Witcher, you may be tasked with killing a spirit. You'll have to track it, take it down, and you may see another, but not for a few hours, or unless you seek it out. They are complex and unique fights, and in this situation, less is more. You remember how awesome it was when you finally felled the beast. In Dragon's Dogma, Cyclopses become just another obstacle. They just weren't fun anymore, and it's the same for all of the larger enemies. Goblins and smaller enemies also become no challenge, and just serve to slow down my progression in walking from one point to another. I was excited the first time I saw a dragon. I was less excited when I saw another dragon in the same location 2 more times while making my way from Vermund to the checkpoint town. The world didn't feel alive anymore. It felt like it was designed to slow me down and make me repeat tasks to flesh out a small world. What this game really needed was a mid-tier enemy. To explain that, I'm putting small enemies, goblins, wolves, lizards, into one category, and large enemies like ogres, griffins, golems into another. As you travel the world, you run into a pocket of small, then a large, or a few pockets of small before eventually a large appears. What the world really needed was more variety in these engagements, or a mid-tier enemy that could bridge this gap. Small groups become tedious quickly, and again only serve to slow you down. After feeding a large enemy 2 or 3 times, they also become relatively trivial. They're great the first time, like fighting a boss in Elden Ring or a new enemy type in The Witcher, but after I've beaten an enemy 5 times, do I need to do it again? You get some small materials from killing them, but by the time I started upgrading gear, I'd killed so many that I'd only need to go kill more if I was constantly switching armor and vocations for both myself and my pawn. This game would have been up there for Game of the Year if they'd just given us a bit of a progression system with these enemies. The guild that upgrade your vocations could have provided special missions dedicated to this, with rewards like fairy stones for killing X amount or something smaller. Give me a reason to do it and I'll find more enjoyment. I'll find more content. I'll find value. But they feel like they were just put simply to slow me down at certain points. Also, while traveling the same road, it became disappointing to know their spawn points. This world doesn't feel alive when I know exactly where the same enemies will be time after time. Sure, this is also a staple in other games I've mentioned, but when you have no real progression other than XP tied to them, you take notice of what's behind the scenes more clearly. Now, this might sound like a bit of an unhinged comment at first, but give me less enemy density. For a game that limits fast travel, it became a chore leaving towns, because I knew within 5 feet I'd be fighting goblins. 20 feet past that, I'd certainly meet an ogre or cyclops. If I didn't, it'd be some more goblins, humans, or lizards, and then an ogre or cyclops right after that. It's even worse in Batal. There's something around every corner. For God's sake, I want to see the world, not fight 100 men while taking a stroll 5 minutes outside of town. An open world only feels open when you can breathe in it. Take in the sights, explore areas that have no or limited enemies. Think about Elden Ring, think about Red Dead Redemption, think about The Witcher 3. It is entirely possible in each game to walk down a road for a period of time without seeing an enemy, or at least without being forced to fight, and being able to navigate around them. If I can't breathe in your game outside a settlement, what is there to the world around me? Once the challenge of killing a cyclops becomes as easy as squishing an ant, why do I keep doing it? I'm just smashing beetles at that point. Well, let's close out talking about the difference in Critic and consumer reviews. For context, using Metacritic as our measuring tape, critics landed overall at an 8.5, while consumers are hovering just over 6. Personally, I sit with the consumers. I don't hate this game, but I know it could have been so much more, and I think that's where my disappointment lies. So let's look at some of their takes. Game Informer mentioned that the game captures the spirit of the original without compromise. Its insistence on player discovery and progression, coupled with its ending, impressed the reviewer. IGN gave it an 8 and praises its dynamic world, combat, and complex physics. They mentioned finicky AI, clunky climbing, and camera and frame rate issues. They land on it being rewarding if you can embrace its hands-off open world and quest design. Kotaku gave it a positive review, and strangely commended Itsuno for spending the last decade refining his concept. Which, and this is my opinion, I'd be a little surprised if that was the case. It appears they remade Dragon's Dogma with some very minor tweaks. Largely, the enemies are exactly the same that you'll find in the original. Combat and skills are very much the same and play very similarly. The story follows similar beats overall, spare for how it arrives at its conclusion. I would have loved to see more variety. It feels more like a fresh coat of paint on a product we previously had, not to mention we have no endgame. Nothing from the Dark Arisen DLC for the original Dragon's Dogma appears to have been considered. That was widely loved by players and critics, but its teaching were completely ignored here. Players, on the other hand, have been incredibly vocal about a lack of enemy variety, rife performance issues on PC, which I would argue are largely inexcusable, and some woes relating to the game's microtransactions. I'm very disappointed. This company largely hid their PC issues by giving most reviewers PS5 copies. This was intentional. They would have known the state of their game, and if they didn't, they're moronic. It would have been an intentional choice to limit the reviewer's experience of the game, which led to a higher overall score. Further, many feel the game was rushed, especially when it comes to the second half of the story and a lack of innovation in its design. Now, I don't want to talk about microtransactions all that much, as they can largely be ignored, but I will say it's disappointing to see their inclusion as a cash grab, as it flies in the face of the game director's own statements. Don't tell me you want to create an immersive world and limit fast travel and only allow one save to ensure players are immersed, and then offer to sell me convenience items. Yes, they're available in-game. Yes, they can be ignored. But I want companies to treat consumers with respect, and this isn't it. You can't tell me you haven't included convenient game systems like multiple saves or fast travel because you want your world to be immersive, and then sell me convenient items for cash. You hypocrite. Now, if you've brought these items, you do you. But honestly, it's a sad cash grab. And I'd be ashamed if I'd directed the creation of this game and then included these. I wanted to love this game, and I don't think it's bad in nature, but it's not an 8.5 as it sits on Metacritic. This game could have been Game of the Year, but it's undercooked. I'd say it's a good statement on what comes from a AAA studio these days. They had a vision, They started executing it. The bones are there for what could have been an insane game, but they started cutting corners. Or they got lazy, or they're stuck making games the same way they did a decade ago. They said they didn't want fast travel as it would shrink the world. I liked that. I like traveling by foot. It does make the world feel bigger and more alive. I played WoW Classic earlier this year and loved walking from place to place initially. But when I'm fighting 2 Cyclops, an Ogre, and 20 Goblins or Mercenaries or Lizards on my way to the border town, and then fighting the same on my way back, and then fighting the same on my way to the Elven settlement, and then the same on the way back, often in the exact same locations without any feeling of progression, what's the purpose? Your world doesn't feel larger because I have to wade through trash to get to the good parts. It feels plastic. It feels lifeless. It lacks direction, like the pawns following me around. I now wish I could have fast traveled there to experience more of the world without the tedium in the middle. And all it needed was a little more variety, a little more meaning, a little more value. An extra system built around all of this, other than simply leveling up and slowing me down, a reason to kill them over and over. There are some truly great moments in this game, but as I moved into Batal, I stood on the hill overlooking the area and saw 3 golems, human mercenaries and goblins, and my heart sank. I knew I was in for more repetition. I loved fighting a golem for the first time. I haven't enjoyed fighting the 5 after that. It's because it's more like the Cyclops, an awesome spectacle dragged down by the sameness. They're too common to be interesting. But hey, these are my thoughts. What are yours? Do you think Dragon's Dogma 2 is living up to the hype? If you made it this far, please consider liking, subscribing, and letting me know your thoughts in the comments below. It helps me out a lot, and I actually love hearing your thoughts. If you're enjoying Dragon's Dogma, I am all for it. Me not having fun by the end doesn't take away from you having fun. I actually quite enjoyed the start of this game, it just unfortunately lost me. If this is your game of the year, I love that and I honestly want to hear it. I wish it had been mine. I'll catch you down there in the comments. Thank you very much again for watching, and see you later.